Okay, so we have a gorgeous deer on the moorland, in the moorland heather, which is just so beautiful and atmospheric. And you can kind of see this is probably around August time, isn't it, where we get this lovely moorland heather, sometimes like dipping into early September as well. And you would expect to get this morning mist as it's getting, as it's not quite, quite as, the heat isn't quite as much in the air, and it cools off a little bit in the morning. But it's just really, really lovely. But obviously there's other different ones that you can try as well. This one, take this down. This one I've chosen really just because there's some gorgeous mist, and I thought it's quite nice to be able to show you how to approach the mist, because sometimes people find it a little bit tricky. So we will take the difficulty out of the mist. And really, this particular picture is like it's like two halves, isn't it? So what we've got effectively is this bit at the top, where it's very much, you can see the behind, but yes, it's very much under different amounts of mist. And then obviously in the foreground you have these gorgeous deer just poking out of the top of the heather. So we can almost treat this like two separate pictures, which is really lovely. So I've got a little tester strip here as well, which is quite handy for the colours. And I've just got my little palette. You could have, if you wanted something like a bit of tissue to help, that's fine. Also, if you do have a shade of purple that's, just a straight purple, or a straight, even you can add or a pink you can add in as well. And if you've got those colours already, you pop those onto your palette, because it's fine if you want to, if you haven't and you're going to mix it. But just sometimes people get quite frustrated with trying to mix a purple and just not being able to get the exact purple that they can see. And that's absolutely fine. That sometimes is just to do with what shade of red that you've got in your kit and what shade of blue. Sometimes it's just not going to make the type of purple that you want. So you don't really know that until you get going. Sometimes we have to adapt it a little bit. But on mine, I've got a purple. I've got a white for a tint, because the tint's going to be quite important with this bit of a misty bit in the background. I'm going to put a brown, a darkish brown actually, on my palette, and that's looking at the shadows, but I'm going to be able to make a tint with that as well, just to kind of in the background, to make that a little bit less harsh. I'm going to put a blue on there in case I do want to make up some other different purples. Pop the blue. I've just got a cobalt blue, but you could use, it's a lighter one, but you could just use an ultramarine if that's what you've got, just to give a little bit of a shade and everything. I think that's it. I think that's all I might pop on there. So not got many colours on there tonight, or it may be, if you're doing a green one, obviously you might want to put a little bit more green in your kit. That's the only other suggestion I've made. And so let's have a little go. Let's see. Just at my camera. There we go, just a tad. So yeah, so let's have a look. So I would just really be thinking about separating this into two sections. I can draw a little bit out. It's only if you want a little bit of direction as to remind yourself which bit to do in the mist and which bit not. But if you can do that without drawing a line on it, that's absolutely fine. So I'm just doing it just because it might help. We've also got things like this branching, but we won't put any of that in until we've got this background, because what we will be, obviously, if we're building this up like using this layered approach, we tend to obviously go what's in the very far background and then work our way forwards. And in some places we have a heavier buildup of mist, and in other places like this branch, particularly here, some of it's in the mist, and then some of it almost comes out and it's not as in heavy mist at the front here. So we can actually recreate that with our this branch that's heading forwards, just by putting less of a tint on. So I'm going to show you how we can build up. So I would almost start with this top layer, because this front layer almost comes over the top of the back one as well. So I'm going to have a little look at how we can kind of make this lovely misty feel. So although we've got this purpley pink tone in here, there's almost some, I don't know if you can see it, it's just having a go at using some really relaxing, very kind of calm tones, and how we can build that up. So I might be inclined to kind of make this a little bit more purple underneath. I'm going to kind of go pinky in the middle because that's what I can see. And I'm going to go to a very, very neutrally bluey brown with more white of a tint in there. And that's the base layer. So that's not even thinking about the mist coming over the top. However, when we add an element of mist in there, we can do that over the top. I'll show you how to build that up in a really helpful way with acrylic. It is quite straightforward. We can build that up over the top. We can get this, we can actually influence though, even when we put the mist over the top, the fact that this is in the background and make it much more pastely and much more loose so we can't see the detail. Whereas at the front, this will automatically make it pop forward a little bit when we've got the detail of the deer and of the foliage here. So we can just kind of make this very blendy. So there's two things. You can end up with quite, with some quite almost strips of colour, or if you prefer, we can get it to even these layers at the back, we can blend into one another so that there's this very soft feel. It's almost out of focus as well as, because it's in the background as well as being in the foreground. So really it's just about kind of mixing up your colours to getting those bands of colours that you want, and having a little test. So whatever you see, I would say go with that. There are going to be some, might be some darker areas in there, but we can make them, add a tint with white to those colours to kind of really pull those colours into much more pastel-y tints than at the front. So just sort of have a look. So for this one at the top, I'm almost going to go for it. I think I mentioned before, like a bluey. Let's bring my palette over. Like a bluey, tiny bit of brown in there. First, we're just going to have a go and test it. This kind of it's almost a bluey grey tint I'm going for there. It's got a touch of brown in it. It's going to add a bit more white. So just go, once you've mixed the colour that you're really happy with, I would say the biggest thing with it, with getting these layers, if you're wanting to blend, I'm going to test that first just to see what colour it's actually come out. See if I'm happy with it. Yeah, I'm quite happy with that. It's very, very, it's a very, calm colour. So I quite like that. But again, you can mix up any colours that you like. So I'm mixing them up. And the key really for it is to keep this, to keep it really quite damp whilst we're working the next layer into it, if we want to get it blended. So it's a bit softer feel. So I'm going to also mix up my next one, which I'm going to go for this more pinky mix. Now, remember what we said last time, it's really important to keep, if you're going in between with blues, make sure your brush is really clean, just on a bit of a picture or something, so that you don't get that grey tone blending in if you want your pink to be a little bit more vivid. And again, this pink is going to be very different depending on the red that you've got. So mine's Acadian red, it's almost a little bit orangey. So it's going to give me a very different pink than if I actually added, more like a pillar box red on there. So I'm just going to use that one that I've got. So it is quite strong. So what I might do is actually add a little bit, tiny bit, just add up a tiny bit of, let me try to add a bit of yellow in there actually. Just to soften down. Look, try that out next to it. Yeah, it's just still a little bit. I'm going to add a tiny bit more red in there and then a tiny bit more white. So you'll know yourself when you're starting to get a feel of the colours. That's almost a little bit too cotton woolly for me. But when you hit a pink or a colour that you like, run with that, because that's the joy of it, isn't it? You're observing a colour that you just think, oh, it goes so well. So important in painting is connecting with that colour that you've got on there. So then a little bit more white. Okay, so when you get into a shade that you like, what I am going to do though with these pinkies, I might even add a tiny bit of purple. Maybe that's what's missing. This is why we'll trial and error all the time, aren't we? We're just kind of adapting. Maybe adding a tiny bit of this purple. Now I'm happy with that now, funnily enough. Must have just been missing that little bit of a tone that I've quite fancied. And again, it's making sure you've got enough mixed up on your palette to go in there with. Okay, and then I'm going to also have a little mix at the bottom of this here, which is almost a bit more purpley, but it's still quite, I feel like, pastel-y in there. So I might even just get a bit of purple here and some white. Look how that goes. Just enjoy mixing up the colours. I quite like that actually, but I'm just going to drop in ever so small amount of this pink that I've just used. So it's much more this tone, but it's still got these elements of these pastel colours in. Yeah, I think that's where I'm going to go. I'm just going to test it again to see if I want to put any more white in there. No, I really like that, so I'm going to go with that. So again, so when you've obviously found your colours, as long as you've got, as long as it's damp enough, you should be able to blend those really nicely. So I'm just going to go for a slightly bigger brush because this is kind of a bigger piece of mine. And then I'm going to keep that nice and damp and work fairly quickly with this bit, and I'm just using little circular motions. You don't have to, it's just like, that's the kind of like way I like to, it feels comfortable, just to kind of get a coverage on these, these areas that we've got here going on, because obviously we're going to put mist over the top as well. But what we've done is we've kind of helped ourselves along by giving it that pastel feel anyway, so that when we cover it, it'll be even more pastel-y. So I'm just kind of looking at whereabouts I want to pull the colour down a little bit. And then because it's still wet, I'm just going to really make sure my brush is really clean in between. Get rid of those blues. And then whilst it's still wet, I'm going to go in with these pinks. And you can just, get your colour on. Keep it moving. And then just kind of get off your colour there. And if you want to, you can kind of blend it over the next bit. So this stops it getting that much harsher line of a feel, whereas with pastels, you can easily kind of blend that in with your finger. We can do the same, we can do exactly the same. So I'm just going to look at whereabouts I'm going to move this to, whether it kind of overlaps some of these bottom areas as well. And although we're still going to pop the mist over, it just really helps us it feel, a really peaceful scene. I'll bring it down here and then here. And then again, we can then move on to the next layer. Whilst it's still damp, I'm going in with this much more purpley colour. Now, obviously, we've got shadowy areas in here as well, which I haven't really looked at yet, but we can. Just wanted to really get in those, make it blendy. So that's why I'm trying to move a bit faster. Don't worry if you haven't and it's already dried. You can go back and just kind of like with a wet brush, just work it in a little bit. It's lovely. And it really helps as well with it being quite loose, because we can then, you know, it just gives a sense of being further back, because things are less detailed, aren't they, when they're further back. So if you've got any other areas that you want to kind of like blend in a little bit more together, as I said, just clear off your brush and clean it a little bit. Just go back and just kind of wiggle it around with a clean brush. And just, you know, you can do it that way. It gives like it just makes it a little bit more, I suppose, seamless. So my top is less blended, but I'm going to just really fix that with the going over the top with the other bits. So the only other bit in here that we haven't got is like these little darker areas here. So I am going to do something, put a little bit of dark in there, but again, normally I'll probably go straight in, but I'm going to actually tint it off. You know, we'd normally go straight in with a very dark brown or something, wouldn't we, at the front, but we can do the same because it's still in the distance. I'm going to use a bit of brown, bit of this blue tint, because I'm not going to be using that again. Bit of brown. Okay, and I'm happy with that. Or you could use just brown and a bit of white, you know, and make it quite a much lighter one. And then whilst it's still wet, I'm just going to come in and create a little bit of kind of detail, just a small amount, not much, where I can see these patches of shadow in the, you know, the back of the heather here. And again, if it feels too harsh, just add a little bit of water. Just water it down ever so slightly, and then it will be less intense. But you won't know till you put it on, really, whether it's too intense for your eye. It's more about how it feels to your eye. I'm just popping some of these in where I can see the heather at the back, these patches. We know it's there, don't we? And again, you know, if some of them you think, actually, I like it wanted to be darker, but don't quite want to go as dark as this brown, because that's where the, you know, the deeper bits are, then you can just, you know, make a bit of a tint with one of the colours you've got in here, like the purple. So add a bit of purple to that brown. See what happens there as you get nearer to the back. So it becomes less, you know, less of a contrast, as it were. I'll just pop some of those in there. And again, you can even just use circular motions just to pop those into place if you want to. And if you're not happy even with the ones you've done, I quite like having a few lines because it's starting to feel a bit more broken up there. But you can even soften that with the brush, look, even, you know, whilst you're still working on it. Get some of those shapes of the heather and stuff in there. Okay, so we still haven't done the mist yet. Something else we probably need to think about is, you know, getting in this little tree line, which is just quite a nice touch. So obviously it's much lighter there than it is here. So again, we can help it along just by mixing up, you know, another tint of brown. I'm going to use brown and a bit of white. Just mix a bit of brown and white together. And I'm going to use almost 2 tones of that, actually. So I'm going to use one that's a slightly lighter mix underneath, just to help again, even though we put mist over the top, it will help create the feeling that this is quite under heavy mist up here. And we can just use a little round brush and just kind of really, quite roughly, really, when I'm doing twigs and branches, I just kind of really just kind of create these interesting shapes, not by doing too much at all, actually. And it'll feel a bit more, you know, a bit stronger here. So right at the end where it's coming out, then I might actually make that a bit darker with less of a tint of white in it, because where it's coming out of the mist as well. So we can tell that's the difference. And then as we're going back into the mist, I'm going to go back to this mixture. It's a little bit lighter. So we've got a sense that these branches are there. But you don't have to put the branches in either if you think, oh, I don't want to, I'm not keen on doing that, then that's absolutely fine. There we go. So yeah, it just helps it along a little bit. There we go. And if you've made it too thick or something, don't worry, because you can go back to, you know, one of the other colours once it's dry, or even, you know, try lifting it off if it's a bit. You can always paint in some of that other colour, like so there. It's too thick, and paint in some of that colour that I've already put over. Just make it thinner with the paint, which is quite ideal, really. Yeah. So at the moment, again, if you remember last time, it can look a little bit childlike, and that's fine. What we'll do is we will have a think about how this mist goes over, and I'd be inclined to put this mist on first, and the reason being is this overlaps, it comes over the top, some of this heather. We might even need to paint in a little bit of this end a little bit again, actually, because we've not got that there, but that's fine, that's easily done. So taking the mystery out of mist, it's much more straightforward than you think. So a nice round brush, if you've got one, will be great. And all we're doing here is we're going to take a bit of light colour, like you can use a white tint if you want, because that is quite very kind of white, isn't it, in here? Or you can make it into a very light tint if you want. I think we'd be okay with white. But what I would say is, what we tend to do is, you know, make it quite thin, because it doesn't matter with acrylic if we do that. With oils, it does. You don't want to be making it thinner over the top of thicker with oils. What you can do is use a different thinner with it that's got more oil in it if you want to do that. But with acrylics, we can just, if we get it nice and thin, we can just literally look at where the areas of mist are, and we just kind of, in circular motions, take that straight over the top, nice and thin. Nice and thin. And what we can do is build it up, so we don't have to put it all on in one go. Sometimes it's working out how much white to mix and how thin to make it. If you make it nice and thin to start with, bring that mist over everywhere you can see it. Might be the whole of that picture. It's not going to rub underneath the background unless you're really scrubbing at it, so that's okay. So we're going over the top with this mist. Now it might be you think, actually, it's not really covered it enough, in which case that's why we go back again. We can build another layer in. We'll just add a tiny bit more white. Tiny bit more white. And go over and see where is the main bit of mist. Oh, there. So there's a lot over this side, isn't there? So you might be able to see a difference now with that, as it's coming over this side, look. Really kind of build that up over the top of all the misty areas, wherever you can see it. And it's okay if it's thick mist everywhere, because it is quite, isn't it? And what it does is covering over all of those strips, and you know, the strips that we've kind of made. So we just get a sense of those colours coming through without and again, if there's any more you think, oh, I'm going to build it up a bit more, then that's fine. Because we've started slowly, we can really easily build those layers up. If we'd have gone in and put too much white in to start with, what can happen is that you can cover it almost like you know, you can't actually see the colours coming through. So it's nice to be able to build it up like that. So we can still build it up, you know. Keep going, and if you're thinking, oh, actually I'd like a bit more misty effect, have another, you know, put a little bit more on. I'm going to go in with it, keep it moving. And I'm going to stop there because I do still want to see some of the colours come in, and I don't want to get to a point where I can't still see, you know, those nice tones coming through the back. So I'm going to leave it at that. There we go. So we can see, can't we, you know, like where we started and what we've covered, especially where the twigs are, but we can still see them coming through, which is what we want. And it does really create this lovely misty feel. You know, and if you think, oh, I've put too much on, then just grab a little bit of tissue. If there's an area you think, I don't want to have as much on there, just gently just lift it a little bit whilst it's still damp. Or if it's not still damp, just pop a little bit of water on and then just dab it off like that. I'm sure it'll be absolutely fine. I think what I'll do then, we'll take a nice pause so everyone can catch up with that, and then see how we're doing. Okay, so now we've got some nice, you know, misty bits on there. We'll have a little look at, you know, the next part here. So we can go over the whole of this if you want to and get all of that background mapped in around this area, and then finish off with some highlighty areas and then put the deer over the top. Or you can, whichever you feel more comfortable with, pop in your deer, and then we just kind of bring some of that background into the deer. And I know a lot of the time I'll say just paint it straight over, and that's absolutely fine. If you want to stick with that, you can. But again, it takes up quite a chunk of the painting here. So there's not a problem really with, you know, working out, you know, whereabouts you want these to go. So that's about halfway across. This one starts. His ears come right to the top. So I would just be doing, like, working out the proportion. You can use your pencil and scale up. You know, I would be looking at, you know, how big about each section is, like his face comes down to about here with that nose on it. You know, how far over it goes. You know, what's the width of his face. I'm looking at those kind of key things really at different points, you know, how wide the face is, what's the shape of the face, what's kind of like the little shape between the ears. And it really doesn't matter if you don't get this right the first time anyway, because we can adapt it with our brush as we go over the top. And you can go over it and put more heather in, for example, if it's going over, if the ears aren't quite right or whatever. There's lots of room for manoeuvring with acrylics. It's brilliant, absolutely brilliant for that, to make his ears slightly bigger there. And then we can, you know, move across and look at like each part of the back. It's quite angular, isn't it? You know, the angle, does it go down slightly? You know, just move it down slightly. And then we're looking at, you know, how deep is the body compared to the face, for example. We're like looking, going, yeah, okay, maybe 1.5 times, something like that. Where does this bit of body come over the front and his neck? So we've got this, you know, the back end here. And you can't really see a massive amount of detail, but what we can see is a lot of tones in the fur, which is fabulous. And then this coming over the top. So we know he's turned round, don't we, even without doing too much. So that, you know, I tend to put a real minimal amount in there. We can see some dark areas, which we must assume is kind of like underneath the back legs here. And then obviously get your other one in. We can use this deer as proportion. The ears are the interesting shape, but and if you look at everything as just shapes and then tones as we do going through the next bit, then that's fine. It's got, this one's head is quite angular, isn't it? We get like almost hexagonal at the top and the eyes. got a slightly smaller face than this other one. Get the ears on. And then again, you know, we're looking at the neck, how far down does that come? We can only see to a certain degree. We can see like the angle. We can actually make that angle with our pencil, which helps. And then we can also see where the neck appears to start from. We've got this light coloured fur here, and then the neck coming down. Same here. And then when we've got the neck long enough, we can take this, you know, right over, can't wait, and get the back of the deer, just to see it poking out from all that lovely heather. Because all this heather, you know, will kind of come over the top of the deer here. And the same here, you know, we'll put those will be the last details that we put in. I'm just kind of doing that just for illustration purposes, really. So what we can do is you can kind of go back to your heather if you want to, and pop that in first. I would tend to do that so that then we can really focus, you know, not the heather at the front perhaps, because we can pop that on, but certainly the heather that's coming around it, so it doesn't make it finicky once we've got a very angular body and things in. So I'll do that perhaps now. Mix up the colour purples that you want, and I go for a mid-tone in here, because we can add the lighter ones and we can add pops of colour, which works really well. So can you see yellow? Can you see any green? Can you see any like bright pops of pink, or, you know, or other different types, or is it very dark? So, you know, you can go in with a mid-tone to start with, and we'll put the other things in like we do normally. So let's get this mid-tone in. Again, I'm still going to make it pastel-y because it's not this bright purple yet. But I can add things to this. We can add things to make it more blue based. We can add things to make it a bit more pink based. So again, I can take some of this purple and add a little bit of red to it, and a bit more white. More white. You know, you can add some of these nice pinks in there. Or you can go, so I'm mixing it over here, just mixing up these colours here. You can start with a bit more blue. Just bring a bit of that pinky pinky tone into it. All sorts of different colours we can add in there. So if you pick one that you want to start with, you know, we can even add, if we wanted to, kind of colours like just a touch of yellow, or a touch of red or something in there if you want. But I'm just going to go in with a mid-tone to start with, because I'm going to pop in some of these others over. So all I'm going to do here is just kind of make some of those shapes. I'm going to bring it just inside the, and I can break it up into tones. You can do this, you can actually add it with these different tones if you want. So you can pick out the ones that are slightly brighter if you want. And pop it on as pop those tones on where you can see them, where they're a bit brighter. Just use a bigger brush to get them into place. But I'm kind of coming more or less a little bit into the actual figure, just so that there's no gaps really once we start to do it. And then if you've got other tones in there that are slightly different, you can start to use, you know, start to pop in some of those. They're still mid, aren't they? They're still mid tones. Because we've not got like the highlights or anything on them yet. And we're just building up around, aren't we, with basically with some of these different, really different lovely tones in there. a bit more pinky over here. So I'm going to go for much more pinky in this area. And I'm not thinning it right down like we did the sky. It's going on slightly thicker, but enough so that we can, it makes it nice, easy, pleasant experience. We're not having to drag it or anything like that. Yeah, so we can keep building up like that if we want to, just around it. And then we know we're not having to faff about with all like trying to get these little tiny pokey things in between and kind of spoil the picture that we've actually got in there. You know, we'll still take this over the top a little bit anyway, but it's just a bit easier. So yeah, we're just popping all of these tones in. And we'll still work in the, you know, all of the detail and everything in a bit. So have a look at what you've got. You might even need to change the tone slightly, just see what's working. The only thing, isn't it, when it's hot, it dries, your paint dries much quicker. Yeah, so just getting in these lovely patches. And obviously we've got some dark patches in there, but I'm just going to get all of these colours where I can see them. When you start to see new tones anyway, you might start to see like a bit of a yellowy tone or something else. And if you do, then by all means add that in. I'm just putting a little bit of yellow in with this purple just now. Put a bit of Naples yellow in with a bit of the purple. It gives me a slightly different colour. So I'm just trying that. But by all means, you know, have a little, you can use that. If you wanted a bit of the purple slightly change, you can add a little, rather than having Naples yellow, you can put yellow, a white tint, and some of the purple. That's another way of doing it. I'm just using my brush to pull down, you know, create some of the shape of the lavender, of the heather as we go. Now, obviously, there's some dark patches in there, so we pop some of those in as well. And we obviously can work that much more as we go through. We're just getting a good base. So I'm just going to go in. So again, the difference here is that these darks are a bit darker, aren't they, than the ones at the back. Now you might want to go greeny brown and even still apply a little bit of a tint, or you might not. You might want to go straight in with brown. I'm going to try a bit of a greeny brown because I can see a touch of it in there. Let's have a little look. So I'm going to try a tiny bit of green. Tiny bit of brown. And then I'm still going to add, it's almost a bit of, what is it, a blue tone? I don't know. You could even try a bit of purple if you wanted a purpley brown in there. I'm going to pop a little bit of a tint, just a very small bit of white in there. Not much. Because I do want a contrast between the browns at the top. And now I have to put more colour back in there. It's gone too pastely. Right. Let's see, if in doubt, that's better. So if in doubt, you can just try it, see if it goes. This has got a bit of purple in it as well. My one here. Browns, purple, and a bit of a tint with a bit of just a very small amount of a lighter colour. And I'm just going to go in there. Now you can go in, if you want to go in finer with a finer brush, you can, or you can go in with the same. I might just go in with a slightly finer brush actually than that one. I'm not going in with the tiniest brush because I'm going to do that a bit later on, but I do need to create, because obviously this creates the depth in there. It shows us like, and at the front you do get more depth in because you can see the patches. So I'm just going to work this in. You can make those lines much finer if you want to. It's quite a bit heavy, and again, you know, it's about the balance that you like. So you don't, just because there's a lot of dark in one area doesn't mean to say if you're not keen on that you have to recreate it. You can put less dark in if you prefer it to be much lighter. So you adapt adapt it to what you like. You know, not everyone likes a strong contrast. I think I've said that before. As long as there is more contrast here than there is at the back, that will help. So where else can I see some shadow? I've just added a little bit of purple to this as well. This brown. We're just creating the depth of the shadow. It's really quite enjoyable just getting all of these little areas in. And again, I think I've said before, when you're working in acrylic, everything feels a little bit childlike until near the end, so don't worry. It's definitely how it would feel and how it looks. Not until we start popping those top layers on, which we haven't done. It just feels all a little bit unbalanced. Once you start putting these beautiful deer in though, it'll all change again. It'll be absolutely wonderful. Yeah, so just get some of these, just create some of the where the some of the depth of this lovely heather. We're just building it up, it's really lovely. We can see almost like those, you know, almost like the swathes of it, can't we? But yeah, you by all means make it a bit lighter if it's too much for you like that. But all of it will disappear anyway. So I would say, you know, don't worry too much about getting the highlights of your heather on just yet. We can do that at the end because obviously we've got bits to come over the top. So this will look very unbalanced at the moment. But what I would say was we can go back and like pick up those lightness bits as we go through and have a little focus on the deer. So I'll just take a pause and see how you're getting on, give you a bit of time to work through yours. So we're about there with just getting our base layer and shadow layers on the bottom here. So that's absolutely fine. So what we'll have a go at doing now is having a focus on these gorgeous deer They really are very, very lovely. And obviously I'm going to move this a little bit nearer to the camera. So really, you know, I think when we're thinking about fur, what we're thinking about, and the face as well of the deer, is just there's an awful lot of lovely shapes in here and different tones. And if we can build those in, really, that is going to really help us with drawing animals, so that they needn't be quite as scary as they look. Because a lot of faces and things with deer and other animals do have quite you know, obvious markings, particularly deer. So we've got within here, we've got several different tones. We've got this darker tone, which is still, it's dark, but it's not really, really dark. And then we've got this, the darkest is probably the area at the back underneath the hind legs. And then we've also got this darker area on the back here. But then we've got these lighter tones here, like really peachy, aren't they? Or very, very light and kind of a Naples yellow. And then we've got these lovely reddy tones as well, which are almost a bit like burnt sienna, but not quite as intense. So maybe a tint of that. So I just sort of, so yeah, so there we go. So it's just having a little look at mixing some of those up really and having a nice palette ready. And then we can start to focus in. I mean, what I tend to say about this is if you want to draw some where the eyes and things go, that's absolutely fine. But what I always tend to try and start with is these eye, you know, the eye shape of the eyes in a feature. Mine's going to be quite small on here, but obviously the bigger you go, you can make them a bit wider. And you do tend to find, like, obviously that the eyes and nose does tend to be on an animal is more black, to be fair. So, or I haven't got black with me in this kit, but I have got Payne's grey, which is very dark, so I'm just going to use that. You can add a bit of brown to it if you want to make it darker. So I'm just going to mix a bit of brown, a bit of Payne's grey to get a very dark colour, or you could just use a bit of black if you want. And then I tend to go straight in and just get those eyes done, because that's the bit we all avoid doing quite often. And this triangle of eyes and nose, actually, once you've done that, you can do the whole of the face, the ears and everything around it. It's a really good place to start. So if you want to draw it out, that's fine. So we're just looking at these, and again, if you look at the animal's face, they're really quite angular, aren't they? When you look at the eyelash, like where the eyelashes come out the side, we don't need to be too nervous about it. We're just make sure we get the right distance between it. We get the eyes coming in. And then get these eyes coming round, come down, don't need these lovely ovally shapes. And again, you know, just get everything in, start to do it. You might find you want to adapt it, and we can really easily adapt these, by the way, with acrylics, because we can just get them into place. And if you're doing everything around it, and you think, oh, it doesn't feel right, just paint like over it, around the edge that you've got, you know, that's not quite where you want it to. It's really straightforward. So I'm just going to get these eye shapes in. And they will look like, you know, very, very bright. So don't worry about that at all. I'm looking at whereabouts down the face they come as well. You know, where do they start? You go up. they'll soften, the look of them will soften. So don't give up straight away and think, oh my gosh, they look really strange. Just work around it. Get those eyes in where you think they're going to go. And then that's another shape of the eye in. You're quite, on the edge of the face, aren't they? But again, we can soften them, we can work around them if we've not quite got the right shape, that's absolutely fine. But I am using a finer brush, so I've got a bit more control over where it goes. Okay, and then from there, I might use just get the nose in as well, and just make sure I've got enough of a gap between where the nose is. It's easy not to make it quite long enough. And again, we've got some funny shapes coming up, haven't we, like that, where the nose is. We can go over like those little light coloured dots here. We can, where the nostrils are, we can go over those after. Just trying to get in the general shape and feel of it. Same on this side here. This one's got takes up quite a lot of it, of the face, doesn't it, on this side? And again, there's some lighter areas on this nose as well, which we can get in a bit later over the top, which the beauty of acrylics, we go over with a light colour. So already we've got this kind of we're getting these triangles in place, and which we can adapt. Yeah, we can bring them down all up. And then we can start to use our browns and other colours that we've got on there, in the very darkest of areas. So where the darkest, even on the ears, look, we can get those in. So we can now see a bit more clearly where those the dark areas of the ear are, because we've got this shaping, around. Makes it easy to see where where those go once you've got certain shapes into place. So I'm actually going to follow that round and get that dark area of the ear in. And then we're focusing on, for example, just the ear. That makes it much easier to do. And if there's a funny angle on the ear or an unusual angle, then we can see that as well. I've got lovely ears. So nice. And then I can see a small amount of this dark fur on the top of the head as well, down here. So I'm just going to get that in. And then very soft, I'm just going to add a tiny tint of white to this brown so that I can pop in this colour that I can see on this particular deer down the centre of the forehead. So I may put a tiny bit of purple in there as well, because it is a little bit bluey purpley based, that, and whether it's because it's sometimes when things are surrounded by these colours, you do get a bit like it reflected, especially on photographs. So I'm going to go in with that colour with a tiny bit of lavender. So here I'm just looking at this shape Now it will look darker at the moment, but once we get the contrast on, contrasting colour, it will look different. So I'm just going to look at this. It's almost, you know, it kind of goes down, doesn't it, like this, between the eyes and nose, and then comes around the eyes. So we're just following these shapes again, just a series of shapes. And this is where if you think, oh, it's got needs to be a bit, go a bit further where the nose is, and just take it over, that's absolutely fine. Or if it needs to be a bit wider in the head, that's okay. Yeah, we can look at the other side as well. You know where the other one is it quite as bright, or do we need a bit of a tint in there? And then this one, I'm going to pop this one's head, this shape on this one's head as well. It's quite diamond-like, isn't it? Comes out there. But it's just really interesting when you look at all these shapes. And then almost you get this really much more of a tinting with this one. But much less marking, or we can't see it. Maybe the it's not as much in the shadow, or it might just be the marking on the face here. So it's really lovely, but it's less obvious. You can, I've just put a bit more white in with my tint here, and I'm just kind of dotting it on in between. There's a sense of it there, comes down that marking. So we're just building up all of this, you know, all the darks. And again, it's going to look a bit odd here because we haven't got these, we haven't got all of the elements into place. We're just looking at the tones and the shapes, but already we're well on with the face now. So I'm just going to look at this in here, in this ear, it's darkish again. I'm going to use this similar tint in this one's ear. Just to get there. There we go, and then this one. And then you can darken off, so I'm going to go back into this ear here, put this darker bit inside where the, you know, the depth of the ear is here. So we're just adding in, you know, lights and darks. And then there's almost this fluffy light colour as well, you know, so it's I'm just going to make that tint lighter again with a bit of white in there, and just get those kind of light contrasting, because when we're working on little sections we can do that, get those into place, and it does give you a sense then that you can see, you know, you can see the difference. There we go. So we get all these lovely tufty bits in, and then we've got like the light bits around the eyes here and then down the side. So I think I'm going to go for this tint for this just down the side of this face here, maybe even lighter. I might put a bit more of a white tint in that one, but then I'm going to go a bit more yellowy around the other areas. So let's get this in. So I'm going to add just a bit of a yellowy tint in there with those, so a bit of yellow. I've got a bit of Naples yellow actually, but you can use yellow and white. fine. So a bit of yellow, Naples yellow, and a bit of that tint we've been using. I'll put a bit more yellow in, just so long as it's nice and light. Let's see what that looks like. I'm going to go pop in these lighter bits around the eyes and the head, where we can see the pattern really of it. So it's just taking off that very bright white area there. Just popping in some of the shapes there. Across the top. You know, and if you've gone over something a little bit, don't worry, you can just go back with your darker colour, which is what I'm going to do now, because I've gone over the top of there. And just pop that eye shape, for example, back in, because I've just got rid of the eye shape by going over too much yellow. So I'll pop it back in. So yes, we're just making those, popping all these things in. And there's a little bit of a white pop, isn't there, just here. So I'm going to pop that in. And then on the neck as well, where I can see that. And then again, you know, so on the nose, we were saying there's two little light areas. You can go, I'm going to use a bit of the Naples yellow, just to kind of get that shape, pull that shape down there. And you might get a little tiny glint in the eye as well, so you can almost pop that in. Maybe done that a bit too big. Let me just get a very light one and pop it right in the middle. Right in the outs there. Okay. So we're just carrying on really, getting these different tones that we see. So down the neck, tone there. And another bit of a tint down here. That's a bit kind of more yellowy again. Sometimes you get this pattern of this swathe of fur in there. And then we've got, you know, so we're just looking, is it darker, is it lighter? A bit darker under there. So we're not like spending hours trying to actually copy it. We're just taking note of the patterns of the fur and that and the shapes, and that in turn is just creating the animal and the deer. So it automatically starts to, you know, take shape like that. And, you know, if you feel more familiar with one particular part of the animal, once you've started, you can do, you know, there's no problem with, you know, having a go at doing the other as well at the same time. Yeah, so just pushing the shapes. Now we can continue around the back. You can make this. This is obviously get this nice reddish fur in here as well. So I'll carry on with my browns, popping this on here, and same, you know, whichever bit you're working on, you can make it, you know, use your brush to create that kind of fur effect as well. Just with some brush strokes in there. Put patterns and things in there. Sometimes you get the patterns coming downwards as well, and then obviously we've got the, we're going to have some of this is going to be covered, isn't it, with the with some of the heather. Oh, so lovely. So then you can pop on some of the other colours on there, if you can see the reddy colours. So I haven't got like a burnty sienna colour there, so I'm just going to pop a bit of red. And what else have I got? Maybe a bit of brighter yellow actually, rather than Naples yellow. Yeah, I've got brighter yellow now. There. I want this fur to be really nice and warm. And then just a bit of brown. Be careful how much I actually put on there, otherwise it can really overpower the brown, so let's choose it a bit more carefully. Okay, it's coming now. That colour. So it's really brown, pop this on. You just get a tiny bit of it weave through the skin here, don't you? Not masses, you get more yellowy tones, I think, in there. So I'll pop some of those yellowy tones, other yellowy tones in. Quite light actually in places there, isn't it? And then, you know, on each animal, then you can look at if there are any really light tones that you want to pop in. You might want to pop like where the eye separates from the eyelid. You might want to just create a little you know, just like a little slightly different colour in there. So then we've got our, you know, you can pop any highlights on. So if you've got any really light areas within the deer that you think, oh, I just want to pop a bit more of a highlight on that one, you can use, you know, whatever, depends on what colour it is. I mean, here it's white, isn't it? But some of this is like a little bit of a, you might just get a couple of little bits of the fur there, wherever you can see it. And then the same with the other one. So obviously work through all the different shapes. So here we've got within the face, we've got a yellowy, more yellowy on the face, I would say there. But then we've got more reds on it as well, haven't we, further down. So we've got to make that a bit more ready. It kind of comes in, doesn't it, there? And again, you know, just it's just a little bits that just soften that nose because we've got it quite dark at the moment. So we just need to pop in underneath. It's lighter. And it comes down like that on the nose. And then we've got these light patches over the nose as well. So it's just popping all of these little patches of fur, getting the right tones on them. And it's one of those things where the more you look at animal fur, the more the more you will find there'll bits that you think, oh, I didn't see that last time. So it's just great to get going and have just one go, because then every time you do animal fur or an animal, you think, oh yeah, I can see that. So I'm just changing the shape of the eye slightly there because I'm not too happy with it. Putting a bit of the yellow in around the side, this one. There we go. And then again, you know, looking at the underneath and the neck, which colours do you want to use there? I'm just going to use a bit of a tint under the neck. It comes down here, doesn't it? You just see it, and then obviously we've got the body in there. So we're just looking at all the patches of skin. You've got some lovely, these lovely reddish areas here. So just follow that round. It's really quite red and lovely, reddy brown. You know, we can start to pull the brush around as well to make some of the shape of the fur going backwards here with that red colour. And some of the fur going over here. And obviously we've got these darks as well. There's much darker areas here. If your brown's too warm, you can pop a little bit of purple in it. And then any other colours you can see. So, you know, we've got nice contrast with these yellowy kind of pale yellowy colours on here. And again, we can pull the shape of the fur through with our brush. But it is really like anything, it's just practice and observing how, you know, how it all works. And if you, so for example, if you are studying birds all the time and you're taking, you know, reference, you know, making reference paintings, etc., then you are going to, you know, you are going to become really, really skilled at doing that. So don't beat yourself up if, you know, the section isn't exactly how you wanted it or whether, because really it's all about learning about the shapes of the animal and how it all fits together, and that's perfect. That's the absolute best way to start with it. Better to start than not. Definitely. And have a go, because the next time you do it, you'll be like, oh yeah, I know that that goes there. I've just remembered from last time, and now I can see this bit here as well. So yeah, so again, any of the ears off here, actually, you can just put any highlights in. I'll just put some things in the ears here. Get the shape, and again, you can adjust the shape, because when we first draw things in, we don't like paint with our paintbrush, we don't always see the exact shape. You can move it around with your brush and go over it. That's the beauty of it. And I want a bit of a tint again in there. These ears. Comes all the way around, doesn't it? It's lovely. They are beautiful. Again, you can go over, you know, with any little highlights or anything. If you want to put any highlights on the body, then that's an ideal time to, once you've got everything in place, just pick them carefully. See. But again, it's down to colours you see. So some people might have seen that being more peachy than yellow, and that's fine, you know. That's the beauty of popping your own stamp on it. Okay. Just notice there, this little white bit comes up over this nose here. Okay, that's a bit better. All right, so the last little bit is then to have a little look at the lavender bits where you get some nice, some of this lavender that overlaps. So we've got the mid-tones in there, got the darks. So what we need to do now is to get these lovely kind of throng-like, a bit fairy-like, aren't they, coming up through here. So this is where you can get your highlights. So you can make a tint up. There's lots of different tints there, isn't there? Some are like very pastel-y, others are kind of bright. You can just pop them in. You can go for a slightly bigger brush if you want to. Or you can keep your small one. Your small one, it'll take longer, obviously, but that's fine. I'm just going to go up a slight brush because this one's a little bit splayed at the end, which makes it perfect for popping strands of things in. So I'm just going to mix up. I'm going to mix up a couple of different ones. I'm going to pop in and make up with a bit of red in it. I just want to add a bit of colour. You could use a rose one if you've got rose. I didn't have rose, but I've just made one up a bit. So I'm just going to go in now, have a little look. Are there any areas that I really want to, I do want to pop a bit? And I can just pop them on. You can use any kind of strokes with your brush. You can dot them on. You can, you know, paint strands on. Entirely up to you how you do that. I'm just going to go, just want to get these Pop in some of these brights in there. And you can do as little or as much. You don't have to do loads and loads of them. You can just pick some areas to go over, and some of it will go over the top of your shadow area as well. Don't worry about that. It kind of makes it feel more natural. Some of it will go over your deer, and then some of the other colours you choose will go over your deer as well. So it doesn't all have to be this bright one. I just find sometimes putting a bright on just makes a little bit of it's really makes quite a nice difference in tone. So I'm softening these dark patches down now, because these would have lavender. I keep saying lavender, it's not. These would have heather over the top anyway. So that's what I'm popping in. And then when you've got your brights and things in that you want, then have a little look at your really pastely ones. You know, have you got any really, really pinky ones you want to put in? Or have you got some almost lavender, very, very light lavender ones? Do those, look. To make a really light tint up those. And again, you can start to pop some of those in. Actually, that's not quite enough. I mean, there's a bit more of a tint in that one. Okay, and we get little patches, don't we? So, you know, this is where it just breaks up our background a little bit that we've popped in. They kind of come in all these lovely patches. Sometimes you just get a few lighter ones, sometimes you get more lighter ones. And we're just building up this lovely picture. These are much lighter in the middle. And come through, weave through here. Sometimes it lets, you know, you get patches where it comes through, you can see some of the brighter ones pop through, and you just get the highlighted ones on the top. And you don't even have to pop this on, you can keep it nice and blendy if you want, just have some nice blendy areas if you like, if you prefer that look, it's absolutely fine. And then obviously you've got, you might have some really pinky ones, so just keep looking at what you want to put in. So I'm going to get my pinks, I'm going to wash my brush though because it's getting a bit bluey. A bit of red, a bit of white in there. A bit more white, I think. Okay, there we go. So if you've got an area that's more pinky, you know, you can start to build up the pinks a bit. We've still got that lovely colour coming through, so it just makes it, adds something really nice actually. Again, you might just get a few coming through. You know, and it's knowing how much you want to put on and how much you prefer to leave. There's no hard fast rule about it. Scatter around where you fancy. And then you can finish off, you know, just have a little look, is there anywhere you think, right, I really want a really light one I'm putting in now, I've got the other lights in. And you might have just the odd area where you just pop some really light pops in. And where is it much Where is it lighter than the others? Maybe that, you know, it's catching this light a little bit in some places. Up here, just pop them in, and then it's knowing really, like, have a little look at your work just from a distance. That's really important. Just step back from your work for a little bit and have a little look, because you might find that you're done actually. You think, oh yeah, it looks different now. I've stepped away from it with all these marks on it. I'm going to leave mine there. Quite happy with that. But I would just definitely take a couple of steps back from your work and just have a look. It sometimes stops us like carrying on with it. And you know, I think, oh yeah, I like that now, I'll leave it. So it's our lovely impression. The other thing you can do is, if you'd like, you can go and check, for example, you know, are the darkest bits in? Do I want to darken anywhere? Do I want to make my mist a little bit more light now? That's the only thing I might do actually, is put my mist, a little bit more mist on top of, excuse me. But it gives us all of that feel. But lots of skills in there. And I hope that's been really helpful in terms of mist and fur.